You know what? I'm really surprised because there are so many of you here. 5 p.m., fourth day of the conference, and one thing that I'm absolutely certain about that you're not quitters. So thank you for coming for this session. So, and tonight we are gonna, three of us, my name is Alex Matoshenko and I'm a part of the Project Invisio product marketing group. These guys from our project engineering team, and the majority of the time they will talk about everything tonight. I'm just, kind of introduction person, and I'll be happy to answer any of your questions related to the marketing part of our product. So just today, we already published a white paper document about the performance, the Project Online performance kind of optimization, right? The link that you can see on the screen right now. So if you would like to download, kind of tips and tricks that we're gonna talk about, just go to the link, take a photo, go to the link, download it. It's not indexed yet, so you cannot find it through any search engine. So it's probably better to take the photo. So with that, let's move forward. We have a kind of two pieces of the session tonight.
What?
Sorry? Oh, sorry. You must be quick. One more time. Okay, let me know when you're done. So we're going to talk about two things today. The first part of the session is going to be relatively short. We're going to talk about what Microsoft is doing and what Microsoft done, and going to be doing, to improve the performance of our servers, because this world changes rapidly, right? And we would like to be in the streamline. We invest a lot, in this service and make sure that your experience is good. And before we move forward, I would like to ask you, how many of you already implemented Project Online in your organizations or about to implement? Just to better understand the audience.
Very good.
Okay.
About
Great.
half?
Yeah, about half. So in the second part of the presentation is going to be about the kind of tips and tricks how to improve the performance of your servers by default, by tweaking some things, change some synchronization settings, etc., etc., etc. So Jean Donati knows it better. He's the main presenter, and Chris Boyd from our team, and he's one of the main developers of Project Online and lead of this product. Will help him with that. We have a bunch of T-shirts over here, Project Online. It's not online, Project T-shirts, and we'll give you them for a good, insightful questions. We want to have this session interactive because there are not so many of you here. So if you have any questions during the presentation, please let us know. We'll be happy to answer them. Sounds good? Okay, perfect. Let's move forward. And talking about the performance and what we already done, I would like to ask, Chris to tell you a little bit about what we are doing right now and what we've done. Project Online.
So I'm going to spend a little bit of time before we get into the best practices discussing all the work that we're doing in Redmond to tune the service and to make it more performant. We spend a significant amount of time on the Project Online team, very much focused on performance and scale. And we spend probably a good chunk of time working on some large architectural changes for perf and scale. Some of that you've seen through our content database integration. And then we also spend a bunch of time doing small little fixes and small little optimizations that we ship out on a daily basis. So one of the first things we did when we first shipped out the service is that we built a bunch of real-time telemetry data to collect information, which from a service perspective is pretty cool. On the on-prem version of the product, you're moving too fast ahead. Back. We're on real-time communication. So we spent a bunch of time on our telemetry data and gathering a bunch of insights. And with the service, we can actually understand how you guys are using it. And you also understand the performance that you guys experience with the service. Actually, every single click, every single page load, we understand the full request from the browser up to the service, through the app tier, down through SQL, all the way back up to the browser, and then the rendering of the page.
Yeah. We don't see your data, though.
We don't see your data. It's all PII scrubbed. Yeah, we can't see your data. All we understand is where time is being spent. And basically every single morning I come into work, we have a live set of dashboards. We do a bunch of analysis to see how the service is behaving. And then we tackle any issues that have come up. And then we also prioritize kind of feature work that the development team picks up and optimizes on the page. Awesome, that's perfect. So when we think about performance and how we want to approach it, we really think about end user experiences. There's really kind of two sides that we could focus on. We could be thinking a lot about our COGS, our cost of goods sold, and maintaining our servers and trying to optimize to make sure that we can cram as many users onto a single box and drive utilization on a box, or which kind of competes with a great user experience. And you're moving ahead on me.
Should use the clicker. You can use the mouse.
Oh, okay. Am I going too slow for you? No, I lost my train of thought.
Focusing on your
Focus on end user experiences. So we spend our performance and scale dollars on making sure that the end user perceived latency continues to go down and down and down. And how we do that is that we really think about the 95th percentile. So we're not looking at averages. What we're looking at is, imagine that 100 people load Project Center in a given day, and there's a lot more than 100 people, but just for illustrative sake. Imagine there's 100 people, you order them from the fastest experience to the slowest experience, and then we grab the 95th person in line, and we pull them up, and we say, hey, what was your experience? What was the time that it took for the page to load? And then we optimize for that user experience, and we keep driving to bring the 95th percentile down. So beyond just page performance, so we spent a bunch of time focused on page performance and fixing Project Center and my tasks and timesheets. We've also spent a significant amount of time on the demand management side and thinking about when projects get created and the activities that happen in a workflow. And this is where Jean's going to show a lot of things that we have shipped just recently that I'm hoping you guys will take advantage of to improve the performance for the end users. Because there's as much as that what we can do to make the service fast, we still need people that are maintaining and tenant administrators and people that are writing workflow to do it in such a way that it doesn't trip up the experience. And one of the cases where that happens a lot is in demand management. And you're not necessarily thinking through that there is a user that's waiting for a workflow activity to complete or a queue job to be done. So here we've offered some new functionality to kind of make it easier on you guys to help the end users. So we've done things around the project site and being able to turn it off and create it at various stages in the workflow. We've done work around the SharePoint task list and disabling it in certain scenarios where it's not needed as much for enterprise projects. And we've optimized a bunch around user sync. And Jean's going to go into tons of detail for that and a bunch of demos for us. And then lastly, we do spend a bunch of time on infrastructure updates and making some big investments. And over the last year, I mentioned the Content DB. We've done some work around security and optimizing our sprocs. We've done a lot around user sync, and we've also got rid of just recently our project service application. So if you're very familiar with our architectural diagrams, and lately we've been showing a lot of people about the database consolidation and going down into the Content DB, what you'll start to see is also something missing from our architectural diagrams is the project service app. We've noticed that it's a bit expensive every time having to go back to the service app and keeping things warm and making those requests. So future versions of Project Server, because Project Server gets all the performance work that we're doing in the service in the future release, you'll see the service app disappear and will be no more. Makes setup configuration a lot easier, but really the main driving factor is when we look at our dashboards and we look at the 95th or the 95th percentile, we see these spikes of activity that needs to happen sometimes to warm up that service app, which is a horrible experience. Causes sometimes 20-second page load time. So we decided to get rid of the service app. Say goodbye. So the question was, and I'm only repeating it for for the mic, and I'd appreciate anybody who does ask a question. I'm open to questions. Just make sure we get on the mic for the recording. What are we replacing the project service app with? Nothing. We're doing it in line. So we're just skipping the hop. The web front ends will call directly and grab the data source. And we did a lot of work in 2013 to actually avoid the service application. So this is just an extension of that work. But the web app will directly.
Yeah.
So the question is there still going to be a queue service? The answer is yes. We still have the queue, we still have the eventing service, and we still have PCS, the project calculation service. So now, we're going to, just before we get into developing best practices, Jean will take it forward. One last thing I want to show you is page load times and what the team has been focused on. So this is actually from our live telemetry data showing this is the real graph. Now, it's kind of sanitized for a presentation, but we did make some giant leap forwards within our service. And really, through January, we actually pushed across all tenants, across all page load times, the perf down significantly. So if you guys are online, and hopefully you guys are, did you guys notice a perf improvement kind of at the end of January? Anyone? Yes. Clap if you did. Cheer, please. Thank you. Awesome. Keep you guys awake. So we were very excited to do that. And that's kind of a combination of all that work. That being said, even though we did make a huge perf improvement, we're not done. We still, every day go into work on and check out all those telemetry reports, and we go in and try to drill in and find where those issues are occurring. And from here, I will pass it on to Jean.
Thank you.
Hey, can I ask a question real quick,
Yes.
a follow-up to that one? So you're still going to have those 3 services running on a SharePoint farm, and I'm talking more like for users that are using it on-prem, but there's not going to be a project server service that you start up, no service app anymore.
Correct.
So does that mean there'll be just like, if you buy the enterprise version of SharePoint, project server is just baked into it?
I will say that will be probably for a later conference.
That'll be what?
For a later conference. We'll provide all the details about how all that will work in the
Okay.
future. So, but in the service today, we are rolling that change through. So.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out for people that are doing 2013, I mean, what's a good way to use 2013 to be able to move to 2016 other than, going to online?
Yeah, and that's an excellent question, and I think that's an entire session on its own. So we'll have to make sure that at a future conference we cover all of that in great detail.
And that deserves a T-shirt.
And that deserves a T-shirt, and I'll start running out and handing out T-shirts because from here Jean's taking it forward.
Okay, need to make sure we cover everything. So before we move forward with all the best practices for Project Online performance, it's good to remember that obviously Project Online runs in Office 365 on top of SharePoint Online. And there's a wealth of information already available on how to do network planning and performance for Office 365 overall. How to plan for firewall port exceptions and bandwidth capacity planning and SharePoint tuning. More specifically, if you look at the bottom right corner, there's an entire section dedicated on how to tune SharePoint Online performance. And most of it, if not all of it, obviously applies to Project Online. So I really encourage you to also go through all of this documentation because this is going to be relevant for Project Online. For the purpose of this presentation and the white paper that we've just published this morning and the link that was provided before, this is really focused on Project Online specifically beyond what you can do for Office 365. So we've just picked a couple of product areas that are really specific to Project Online. We're going to talk briefly about security modes, so permission modes, all the synchronization mechanism between, and this is where the interaction with projects and SharePoint in general is going to be critical in improving performance, and project site provisioning is also related to that. We're going to briefly talk about UI customization and look and feel. This is a topic that is very, very, I would say, This is a topic where you can definitely look into SharePoint UI customization recommendations and web parts and all this thing. I'm going to just talk a little bit about this and some specific aspect of Project Online. We are going to briefly talk about some improvements we've made around project detail pages and workflows. This is not directly related to, this is related to performance, but it's not a performance improvement in this case. What we've done is providing more APIs to help customers use workflows and PDPs more efficiently. And finally, we're going to basically remind you of a couple of OData performance best practices that are already published on the web.
Yeah, as you know, that reports is key to the heart of any CXO in the company, so probably want to focus on them separately.
So the first point, permission modes. I understand that about half of you already use Project Online. Do you know which permission mode you're running? How many people use SharePoint permission mode? Quick show of hand. No, Nadine, you don't count. How many people use project permission mode? Okay, most of you. This is okay. We just need to be aware that there can be some performance implications in using project permission mode. Just to remind you a little bit, and I'm going to date myself here, but back in the first release of Project Server, if I don't take Project Central into account, like around 2003, Project Server was a standalone server. SharePoint Server was not a prerequisite. And because Project Server was a standalone server, we had to come up with our own authorization authentication story. And this is the history behind this whole project permission mode. Over the years, with the growth around SharePoint, now we had at first integration and finally around, I think, 2010, SharePoint Server was now a prerequisite. In 2013, we then realized that, we should really take advantage of the security model that SharePoint provides. Like, why should we be in the business of managing end-user permissions and access? This is why we came up with that option for new organizations coming on board to try that SharePoint permission mode, which is very, very simple, and all the permissions are handled in SharePoint. Just to give you a quick data point, currently online, 9 out of 10 customers use SharePoint permission mode. So you're part of the 10%. And we understand totally that some of the requirements of your organization, like security trimming through RBS and these kind of things, require project permission mode. But the permission sync between project and SharePoint can sometimes be expensive, specifically when you publish a lot of projects at the same time and you sync permission to the project sites. And I'm gonna talk about this in a minute. So unless your business needs really require you to use project permission mode, just give SharePoint permission mode a try. Then, what do you sync? We have a lot of syncing mechanisms in the product. Active Directory, project site permission sync, we just talked about this, SharePoint task list sync, and any kind of sync between two systems is expensive. It's nothing specific to project in this case. We have some master data somewhere, and we need to make sure that in near real time we push the data somewhere else. Under load, this can cause some issues. Potentially some sync jobs will fail, et cetera, et cetera. Some people might lose permission, so that's never a good situation. Another thing that we've changed in online, and it's a change from what we see on-prem, is originally, at first, when we launched Project Online in 2013, we've turned basically everything on. When you create a site, you can create project sites. You have your task list synchronized. You have your project site permission synced if you're in project permission mode, and this always on or by default system in a cloud-based environment, multi-tenant environment, is not a good solution because if you're not using it, it's an overhead that you have to pay anyway. And so we've changed that recently, late last year around October, A lot of those synchronization mechanisms now, when you provision a new Project Online instance, are turned off by default. So we really want to make sure that customers make a conscious decision to use feature X, Y, or Z. It's like in your house, you don't turn all the lights on in all the rooms just in case you might go somewhere. So without further ado, I'm just going to do a quick demo of what all these synchronization mechanisms represent. There we go. Did I switch? There we go. Before I get into this, I just wanted to show you the pages that we just talked about. So that's the network planning and performance tuning for Office 365. This is the white paper that we just published, and this is the full content of this presentation, but in a best practice document form. So let's go ahead. So I have this instance that is actually running in project permission mode because I wanted to show you what the implications of that is. It's fairly empty, as you can see, but I'm going to turn everything on, all the syncs. So for this, I just go to the PWA settings. One of the first things I'm going to set, and I think it might already be set, but just double check. So if I go to connector SharePoint sites, one of the first settings I'm going to turn on that would have an impact on performance is automatically create a site on first publish. And the second one is that sync enterprise projects tasks to task lists. That's two options turned on. And under, you can see that I do have access to this security section because I'm in project permission mode. So I'm going to go to user sync, enable project site sync. I don't need to do this for the purpose of this demo. And I save. Now I'm going to go ahead and create a project. So in this case, and I create an enterprise project. My enterprise project is linked to a specific project site template, to a workflow. I don't think I have a project plan templates, but that's not relevant in this case. So let's just go ahead and create project Ignite 7. As you can see here, this is processing. It takes a little bit of time. It's going to create the site and all other things. I'm going to show you in a minute the implication of what's going on exactly in the background in the queue. I have my project, and I will build my team. I'm going to pick everybody in my ERP, although it's a rather small. There's just about like 40 or 50 people in that enterprise resource pool. I'm going to save and create some tasks. There we go. And I have some beautiful copy-paste support in Schedule Web Part. Save and publish, and I'm going to check it in. And you can see on the right-hand side, you have some messages here. It's saving the project, publishing the project, and checking it in. Sorry? Save, close, publish, save, publish, close. Good feedback. Okay, let's take a look at on the admin side of things. I'm going to take a look at the queue. What happened in the queue when I did that? There we go. I'm also going to add to see all the jobs that just got processed, because the queue service is awesome and everything is successful. So I need to see the successor's job, right? Refreshing. There we go. Project Ignite 7. So this is, I created a project, added resources, added a bunch of tasks, save, publish, check in. And there's about, I would say, 25 jobs or so. Okay. On this instance, as you can see, everything is completed because everybody's left the building, so there's good Wi-Fi. And my instance is rather small. I don't have a lot of projects. As you can see, I just have 2 or 3 projects in the system, no complex workflow, etc. But there's still like a ton of jobs that are getting kicked off just to create a project. So you can see here, I'm going to go over, there's the start of a workflow. You can see project site update in the middle, synchronizing the task list, some prepare job for the permission sync, and then the actual permission sync, a couple of reporting jobs, etc., etc., etc. Email notifications, so a lot of overhead. That being said, if your instance is small and you don't notice any performance issues, then and you really need all these synchronization mechanisms, then just go ahead and use it. Just be conscious that there is an overhead to doing that. And if you don't need something, turn it off or keep it turned off if it's the default. So I'm just going to show you the difference by disabling everything and creating another project. But I guess you get the point. In this case, I'm just going to say allowing user to choose, disabling project sites. Another interesting point about synchronization, permission sync for project sites. Obviously, customers tell us, yeah, but when I add someone to my project, I want them also to have access to the project site. And this is a fair request. However, the question we can ask, and I think this is one of the comments we've made in the white paper, is that how often do you have new people on your projects? What's the turnaround? What's the churn? If when you create your project you add 10, 15 people and throughout the year maybe you add 1 or 2, you're going to pay that tax every time you publish your project. And so the question is, if you have a couple of people coming on board, then just do the same way you do with SharePoint and just share that site with that person when you need to. So I think I disabled this. Yeah. Back to the project center. I'm going to quickly create another project. Holding on, creating the project. And you see already that it was much faster than the first time. I can start creating tasks right away. It was at least 5 or 10 seconds longer previously. I can go ahead, build my team, select everybody, add everybody, save. Add a couple of tasks, etc., etc. Click on 4 buttons. Publish. And check it in. There we go. Let's take a look at the queue and see what happened. Add the success. Refresh. There we go. There's about, I would say, about half of the jobs that were created previously for Project 7. There is no project site updates. There is no permission sync jobs. We still have the reporting things, obviously. There's no task list sync, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what we wanted to illustrate here. Like, there is a non-negligible overhead in all these synchronization mechanisms. We understand the benefits they give, and I'm sure you do. Just be aware of that overhead and make the right trade-offs for to balance performance and convenience. Good. Any questions on this section? There we go.
Please use the mic. Or I can
Yeah.
do one.
Could you make this a configurable option, perhaps? To have it sync the sites at night or something like that?
Sorry?
Could you make this a configurable option to have the sites sync at night when there's not much traffic and other things going on?
It's to have the permissions synced at night. So it's actually maybe counterintuitive, but it actually in our I mean, we've seen cases where on premises actually customers had a script that would publish all the projects at night, and this is actually causing more problems because when we kick off those sync jobs, whenever people actually publish projects, they don't all publish at the same time, so the jobs don't conflict with each other. If you have a script that republishes all of your 1,000 projects in your database at the same time, whether it's at night or not, then this is when you can run into troubles. Because specifically the permission sync job that we kick off, when we do that, we call SharePoint APIs, and we basically ask SharePoint to update permissions for site X, Y, and Z. And all these permissions are actually in the same table. So we can very quickly end up with either deadlocks or at least table lock escalations in SharePoint. And there's no real way for us to get around this. I'm not going to blame SharePoint on this, but it's not been really designed. Those APIs have not really been designed for mass bulk update of permissions all at once. If it's along the day as people work on their projects, that's fine. But if you try to publish everything at night, this is when you might run into trouble. Yes.
Hi. Specifically on the schedule PDP, can you have a setting to make the ribbon appear without having to click into the schedule, or use some other JavaScript or something to, like the annoying aspect of having always to click into?
To have it always expanded, you mean?
And timesheets too. Do you know guys know what I'm talking about, right?
To have the ribbon always expanded, is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay. We can take that. Yeah. This is a feedback we had. Good.
Also, one more question.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, you talked earlier it's recommended to use the SharePoint permission mode. Question would be, do you plan to add additional functionality like dynamic permissions based on the RBS also to the SharePoint mode, or will that stay only in project permission mode?
No, this is still only available in project permission mode.
But is there a plan maybe to add that there, or?
Not for the 2016 release. No. Good. Yeah, so that was the comment about project side provisioning. Allowing users to choose is a good option, and it's actually one of the option we recommend. I'm going to talk about this when I'm going to talk about workflow. And I'm going to briefly talk about UI customizations and look and feel. So this is a section where, as I said, most of the SharePoint recommendations also apply to project. I just wanted to show you a quick example of what that means and some project-specific customizations that you can make. Okay, so I'm switching to another instance. And this instance is part of our basic demo data set. So it's nothing crazy. There's just two web parts on this page, like the project center with a custom view, some grouping, filtering, custom fields, graphical indicators, etc., and the project center timeline. Now, if you watch some of SharePoint's webcasts on performance optimization, they will tell you things like, don't put too many web parts on a single page. And this is also valid for project. Every single web part that you add will have its own set of resources. JavaScript files, images, CSS that will all have to be downloaded. And then the browser will have to parse it all, even if you don't use it. So the recommendation is make sure you understand the performance impact of all these customizations. So for this, I'm just going to go and show you how to very quickly, quick and dirty way to check page performance load. So let's do a hard reset of this page. Hard reload, basically what I'm asking the browser to do is to reload everything on the page as if I didn't have anything in my cache. So it's going to re-download all the JavaScript, CSS, etc., etc. And here I have a command that's giving me basically the time difference between when the navigation started and when the main content loaded on the page. For page performance, when we showed you the performance improvement, we measure what we call end-user perceived latency. And basically that means when do we finish loading the main content on the page, which in this case is the project center and the timeline. There are a couple of things that are still downloaded in the background, like some of the ribbon elements or the Office 365, what they call the waffle here. Part of this UI here and the menu here and some of the notification area, they're loaded after the fact. They add to the entire page load of the page load time of the page, but you don't really feel it. So to really measure what's the actual end user experience, we check the difference between the start and when the content is loaded. And so in this case, so it was a hard reset, hard reload. Oh, sorry about that. I'm in the console. There you go. So it was what we call PLT1, or page load time 1. It means first navigation to a page when I don't have anything in my cache. In this case, about 4.7 seconds. If I do a second load, a simple refresh, it's called a PLT2. This time around, I have my cache, and it takes a lot less. Before I get into deeper into the demo, I just wanted to remind you that all the performance guidance that we give are based on hundreds of thousands of page loads. So it's a lot more statistically relevant than what I can do here in a couple of refreshes. But just to be safe, I'm going to reload the page a couple of times and maybe take an average. Okay, so it's pretty close. About 1.2 seconds for 1.1 for PLT2. Now, imagine that my organization doesn't really need that timeline. I have 50 projects or 100 projects in my project center. What people are really interested in is this dashboard. I don't need to have this timeline because which one of the 100 or 150 projects am I going to select? So I can just go ahead and edit the page, and we're going to remove that web part to see what's the impact on the page load. There we go. Okay, let's try measuring that again. I'm going to reload. Okay, 900 milliseconds. Let's try again. There we go. So there's about like a 15% performance improvement in this case. Now I'm going to go a step forward and show you that loading all these images and graphical indicators also can have an impact on performance. It depends on what you want to do with the project center. Some customers use the project center really as almost as a BI tool. That's the first dashboard that they see when they load their homepage, or this is the first thing they want to see every morning. On the other hand, some customers and some users just need the project center to actually select a project and take a look at what's inside that specific project. So if I created just a very basic project list here, it's a simple view that has just a project name, no grouping, no filtering, no custom field, no graphical indicators, no nothing. And if I refresh that view, I'm going to make sure that I have the right view. I think there's a bug in Chrome. It doesn't persist the view. It works in IE, I promise. There we go. There we go. I'm bringing up the console again, refresh, and now I'm going to refresh again. Ooh, I've been hitting some network issues in here. There we go. Ah, looks better. Okay, 900. So right now the network is pretty fast. So the difference between those views is not very obvious. When I was trying that on, and we have a pretty fast network here and high bandwidth, but this is definitely not the case for the 95th percentile case that we are tracking around the world. We have customers all over the place, obviously. Another thing to remember is, I don't know if you noticed, but one of the primary data center for Office 365 in the US is in Chicago. So a few miles from here. So it might not be the ideal setup to point at some performance issues because it's pretty fast. And I'm glad that it's fast. But you can try this at home, as we say. Check on your corporate network. Check at home if you work at home. Check at different locations and see what's the impacts or how heavy your pages are. Do you have a lot of customizations? Do you have a lot of web parts on the same page, etc., etc. The recommendation here, and it's similar to the SharePoint recommendation, is really consider Project Online, and it's valid for any type of online service as a website. It's no longer that corporate intranet portal on a local, high bandwidth, fast network. It's like the homepage of MSN or Facebook or Google. Every kilobyte matters, every millisecond matters. And so make sure that you don't design heavy pages with 10 megabytes background images. I'm saying this because we had that case. But try to optimize as if it was a website, internet-facing website.
Jean, what about the hard refresh of the site? Would it show any difference?
What about the what?
The hard refresh, I mean without cache?
Oh yeah, I could do that. Let's see, hard reload. There we go. So that's hard reload of that simple page without the timeline. I think it was like 4 seconds or something for the other one. It's 1.5 in this case. Because we don't have to download all the timeline code, the JavaScript, and et cetera, et cetera. Thanks.
Is that a typical result, that it'll cut timing by 25%?
Yeah, I don't remember exactly the 95th percentile for the Project Center. I think it's around 4 seconds, maybe. But as I said, like here, I don't have a lot of projects, and most customers have more, complex views, et cetera, et cetera. So I would encourage you to try this on your network.
Excuse me. We're not currently using projects in the cloud here, but do you get, I noticed you created a couple of projects there. Does it create a project site for each project? Can you still create a site associated with it like you can for your project server 2010? You know how when you go, project manager creates a project and you can create a site and then the issues and risks go in there?
Yeah.
Is this the same up here?
Yeah, this is what I was referring.
I didn't see when you created the project. I didn't see it prompt you whether you want to build a site or not.
Oh, the prompt you get is usually when you use the client. Okay. Here, just for the sake of the demo, to speed that up, I created projects from the web, and also because I set the setting to create project site automatically on first publish, it was done automatically. I had that project site queue job that was created.
It did create a project site.
Yes, it did. Mm-hmm.
And how much content can you upload to a project site?
Then the SharePoint storage quota limits apply to in this case. When you create a project site collection, you get, I think, 10 gigabytes of free quota just to store the project content, but everything else adds up to your SharePoint storage quota online. And so, yeah. As part of the demo, I briefly talked about workflows, and sometimes customers told us that workflows are pretty slow depending on what they do. After working with a couple of very large enterprise customers using Project Online, we realized they did nothing wrong. It's just that they didn't really have the right set of APIs to basically make their workflows faster. So what we did is we've released 2 new APIs to use with Workflow. And there's also a new article that just got published this morning. The first one is to give you the ability to update custom fields in bulk. Currently, if through Workflow you wanted to edit 3 custom fields, you had to check out a project, edit custom field 1, save, publish, check in, and then do that again 3 times. When you realize how many downstream queue jobs are generated every time you do that, you understand how that can be a problem. And there was no real way to edit custom fields, project custom fields in bulk. So we now have this new method. I'm just going to quickly show you how it looks like. And the documentation that I just showed you goes into a lot more detail on how to set it up. But basically, what you can do now is wait for the project to get checked in as usual, and then build a dictionary of key value pairs with all the custom fields you want to update, and then call this new update custom fields method. So that's a new method that is available to apply all the custom field updates at once to the project. Then save, publish, and check in, and you're done. And this obviously speeds up workflow quite a lot if you have a lot of custom fields to update. The second one is actually related to project sites. We talked about the fact that creating project sites specifically on first publish can be very expensive. So let me just scroll down to the project sites. There you go. When you select that first option, automatically create a site on first publish, we're going to create a site on first publish. And if you create projects through the web, as I showed you, you have that little notification area on the right-hand side that says, hey, we're doing some work, we're processing it, we're creating this site, et cetera, et cetera. And depending on the network conditions and depending on how SharePoint is busy, creating a site might take 10, 20, 30 seconds, up to a minute sometimes, and it's rather painful. The other problem is a lot of organizations use our demand management features or portfolio management features where we put a lot of project proposals into the system, but maybe only 20% make the cut. So why create thousands of project sites for nothing? And there was no real way to basically condition the creation of project sites to a specific gate in a workflow, for instance. So with that new method, aptly called create project site, you can simply select the second option, which is the one we recommend in this case, allowing a user to choose, or in this case, allowing a workflow to choose. And you can call that method anywhere at any stage of a workflow. It's a very simple method to call. Create project site here. You can give it a specific name, or if you pass in an empty string, we get the project name by default, and we create a project site for you. But in this case, then you end up only creating project sites for projects that are actually that have actually been selected, that are actually going to be funded. And all the proposals that have been rejected will not create that overhead and extra content that you'd have to clean up otherwise, and this is going to eat up your SharePoint quota. So this is a great example where we've been collaborating with some early adopters of Project Online, some very large organizations. They told us, yes, we want to optimize the performance of our workflows and our instance, but we don't have the APIs to do it. So we take that feedback, we work closely with them, we create this content, we roll it out to the service, and now it's available for everybody to use.
I have a workflow question. Is all workflow require customization, or is it just configuration?
It can. I mean, all workflows can be. A lot of things can just be done with SharePoint Designer. We have a lot of predefined project actions. So for someone who's familiar with SharePoint Designer and designing workflows in SharePoint Designer, there's a lot they can do just through the designer. I'm not by any means a SharePoint workflow expert. I know that in the past, to do some more advanced things, we had to use Visual Studio, et cetera, et cetera. But as far as I know, a lot of things can simply be done through SharePoint Designer, as is the case here. This is the case of, this is the live example of that update custom fields method. The interesting part in that workflow is how to build the dictionary that contains all the data that I want to pass in. So it looks like this. Actually, in a much nicer format, you can see that on the online article. So here it is. Like for each field you want to update, you need to provide 4 values, 1 metadata, then the key or the custom field ID you want to update. Then the actual value that can be separated by this character if it's a multi-select custom field, and then the type. And so this is one custom field update. And as you notice here, there is an index increment. So that's custom field 0, that's custom field 1, and custom field 2. So in this case, we're updating 3 custom fields at once. So that's really I would say the trickiest part in that whole process. Once you have that dictionary built, it's just a matter of calling that new method that I can show you that on live in SharePoint Designer. There we go. There's this method, update custom fields, and then if you go to the properties of that call, this is where you pass the request body, which is just the dictionary you've just built in SharePoint Designer. So the online documentation is pretty detailed. Let us know if there is any if anything is not clear enough.
Quick question on that documentation. The previous method to create the site, was the parameter the site name? So we can now define the site name in the workflow.
Yeah. That empty string here. So there you go. You can pass the name of the site you want to create. If you don't want the project name to become the project site name, then you can pass a string. But if you pass an empty string, then we take the default, which is the project name.
Can
Cool.
you pass the metadata to the live documents within the site?
So the question is, can we pass metadata to the documents inside the SharePoint library? I'm not familiar with the SharePoint APIs in this case, but we can look it up. I assume we can. I don't know if you know that. No.
Another question on the APIs. Are you intending to bring these back to on-prem? Please.
That's a good question. Do you want it? Yes. Yeah. So we are working on. I mean, we actually have our PM in the room responsible for the next. I mean, how to package the next on-premises release of Project Server. This is ongoing. So the same way SharePoint is working also on the next how to package and build the next version of SharePoint Server on-prem like 2016, and what's going to be in that build based on a snapshot we take at a specific moment of the state of the service. We are working closely with the SharePoint organization to make sure that we follow the same process. So depending on when we take that snapshot of the service, I assume that all of these improvements are going to make the cut. At some point, the service and the server are going to fork. And this is where they might diverge.
So any plans for it to come back in a service pack to 2013 or 2010?
That would be a question for marketing. No, it's joking aside. I don't know, honestly. Okay. We've obviously, like in historically, we've never added new features to CUs and NSPs, but also we didn't have a large service before, and we didn't roll out new features like that. So I guess the more people ask, the more likely it's going to be that this will happen.
For the method that updates custom fields, do you still have to check out or rather check in the project after publish and check in after you use it?
Yes, it's recommended. Here, there's at the beginning of the step-by-step explanation. There is the outline here, where you have to check it out before making the updates. Otherwise, the project is not editable. Then you make the updates and you log information if you want, and then publish and check in.
Yeah, so it's the same case with the old update project field.
Yes, but
action.
the old method could only update one field.
Yeah, I know. But the question was about the check-in. So the scenario is user creates a project, and on the first stage you update a field from the workflow, and then the project is checked in already.
Oh, no, because, well, yeah, here,
that's what happens
for that action,
for
you have to wait for the project to be checked in first.
Okay. You can also check it in from the workflow.
Yeah, you can. Yeah.
Going back a second to your statement before, if you're on PWA Online and you decide not to create a site, what exactly gets created? So if I want to create, usually I create the site because I need to get init and planning done before I can get approval or rejection. So what's created when you don't create a site in PWA?
Oh, if there's no site, and they try to access that site, they're going to get an error message. So for instance, I know that I don't have a site for Project Ignite 8. If I try to click here, I'll get a message that says it's not been configured. If you still want a site for this project, even if it's in the early stage and it's just a proposal, then it becomes more of an admin action. They can either do it through the client, or you can go to PWA settings, connected SharePoint sites, and here select that project and create the site manually.
Right. I've done that. Okay. Thank you.
I got a question. I mean, maybe you're going to get to it in the presentation here in a little bit, but it has to do with if you want to create another PWA instance, not another project within this one, is that an admin role? Is that like a Office 365 admin role that would go in and create your company a second or a third or a fourth PWA instance?
Yes. Online, this is accessible through, I don't know, I clicked on something here. Oh, there you go. This is an admin operation. You have to go to your Office 365 portal. There we go. And under admin, you have the sub-portals for each of your each one of your services. So when if you go to SharePoint, we are SharePoint cousin, so we are under SharePoint. And then we would load all the SharePoint site collections you have in your organization. So how many PWA instances you have available. We've increased the limit, actually, by the way. When we launched the service a couple of years ago, you could only create 3 PWA instances, but with all the major improvements we've made with the service and the infrastructure changes, now we support up to 7. So here I just have 2, and so I have 5 available. To create a new project site collection, as you probably know, we support now 2 different ways of doing that. Either we can create a brand new site collection, an empty site collection with project, or you can select a SharePoint site collection and then turn on the project features in that site collection. If you already have some content, you have some project sites in like a standard SharePoint site collection, you already have some documents, et cetera, you just want to enable project on that existing site collection, that's possible as well.
All right, I just want to make sure that I'm clear. So an organization can build up to as many as 7 PWA instances?
Currently, yes.
Okay.
So quick follow-up on the workflow for the site creation. If you're going to pass the name of the site, not have it created automatically, whether it's from user input or something like that, and that site already exists, does the workflow just error out, or is there something else that occurs, prompting the user for a different name?
Well, through workflow, you won't get a prompt. I can follow up. I don't want to say something that is wrong, but in this case, let me go back to the. Well, this is the custom field code, but when you call a web service, you also can get the response code as a variable. And in this case, we update custom fields. And for whatever reason, maybe that's going to fail as well. And what we can do here, and we get that response body, and we build a string, and we log it into the workflow history list. So I assume that, I can double check, but I assume that if the project site creation fails, you'll get a message. The other thing you can check is, although this is created through a workflow, if I'm not mistaken, the project site creation is still going to go through the queue. So if it fails there, you also can take a look over there.
Okay. And then the second part of the question was for subsites, would it just be making sure that you pass through the site name as, that it's a subsite, or is there some other option that you have to pick?
That's a good question. I'm not sure. I don't know. I'd have to double check.
Just a follow-up question here. There was a nice solution starter available for bulk editing custom fields in the web. Now you're coming up with this workflow. Are there any plans to take the next step to have it in the web?
Sorry, is there going to be any solution starter? Is that what you said?
No, there has been a solution starter for bulk editing custom fields in the web previously in the 2010 version, for example.
Oh, I see what you mean.
So now you're coming with a SharePoint Designer workflow. Any plans to take it to the next level, to bring it to the web as well?
I don't think so. I don't think we're going to be able to port it back to other versions.
Thanks.
I think we have a couple more content on the presentation, actually. We've, I don't know how much time left we have, but...
15.
15, good. There we go. That was... No? Main PPT. Clicked on the wrong button. As UI customizations and workflows, all the documentation's available online. Finally, OData and reporting. So this is also a very hot topic, obviously. So just a quick reminder on a couple of recommendations we can make for OData and reporting. This is another area where there's things that are under our control, and we're working hard at making sure that OData is performant. There are things that are under your control. One of the things is that when you make a project OData call, you know this concept of, we implemented the concept of paging. So if you request 2,000 rows and the page size is 200, making that one call will result in 10 requests. We are bringing 200 records at a time. And depending on the network conditions, again, this is no longer on a local network, etc. This is over the internet. Having tons and tons of requests can be a problem. To mitigate this, we've been experimenting with, also very closely with some customers, to tweak the actual page size for each endpoint. Maybe in some cases, actually in some cases, we've been too conservative. In some other cases, we've been a little bit too aggressive. So we've been doing a lot of experimentation to figure out where is the sweet spot in terms of page size. The other important thing is when you make a call to get the data, and I would say this is a little bit of a very generic best practice to query any kind of data. Make sure to get only the data you need. And by that I mean there is a temptation to for instance, get all the project tasks for a specific project, and then do the filtering of what you really need client-side. Let's say you just need to do a report on some key milestones for a project. Then you query all the tasks for that project locally, and then you filter on the key milestone on the client side. You can move that filtering server-side by adding some keywords to your OData endpoint and say $filter or $select and say this field equals this value, et cetera, et cetera. So try to move all of your filtering logic server-side. Try to reduce the number of columns you get. Tasks have tons of columns, 10 baselines and all these cost fields and budgets and things you might not need. So use the select options to reduce the amount of columns you need just for your report. Let us do the heavy lifting. Send us the right set of filters and on the server side.
Is there a place to go and get that syntax?
Yes. It's. I'm going to show you that in a minute. It's part of the white paper, but I'm going to show you. If this is still not enough, and you need to do some pretty heavy reporting, we've released a while ago a solution, SQL Server Integration Services package. Now, allows you to query on a regular basis your OData endpoints and store the data locally in a SQL database or in a SQL Azure database. So that's an alternative where then you can use whatever reporting tool you want, SSRS, other things, Excel, Power BI, you name it. And that option is available today. So just to summarize, we've been doing a lot of work to make sure that OData, and we're still working on OData to make it more performant. Try to move all of your filtering and selection logic server-side. And if this is still not enough, consider basically exporting data into using our SQL Server Integration Services package. Before conclusion, I'm just going to show you what I mean by that. It's not a live demo, but we do show in the white paper. This is the Project Online Performance Best Practices white paper that is based on this presentation. And at the bottom, there's just a quick reminder of the OData reporting best practices. With, like, for instance, filter options, select options. So in this case, I want all the projects, but only the projects where the project start date is greater than January 2012, and I only need, 4 fields: the name, the start date, the finish date, and the cost. That would reduce dramatically the amount of data as you pull down. You can also use entity collections. And so by that we mean if you need all the assignments for a specific project, don't get all the assignments in the database and then filter down by project. So there's a way to format your OData URL to just get the assignments for specific projects. So it's all in the documentation. There's a link to that SQL Server SSIS package. There's a full documentation on that specifically with all the commands that you can use to basically pull the data down into a SQL, local SQL database. That is it. So just a reminder, we have all this information on that white paper. If you can, try to use SharePoint permission mode, or at least turn off some of the syncs that are related to project permission mode, like syncing permissions to the sites, et cetera, et cetera. Try to delay creating project sites if you can. I showed you a couple of examples of how customizations impact performance on page load times. This is highly dependent on your own network conditions. So feel free to try it at home. And then there's a couple of tips and tricks on OData that I just showed you, with potentially also the option of pulling the data down to a local database for easier reporting.
Thank you, Jean.
I think we have a quiz.
We have a quiz, but I don't want to stand between our customers and their dinner. So, and we already have a lot of questions. So please feel free to ask questions if you have. I don't think that we need a QC.
A quick question. Actually, it's a two-part question. I'm actually working on a couple customers actually taking their reporting services out, and kind of putting it to OData feed. So, two things I've kind of found out. For one, is the project team looking at this whole web API thing? It seems like every other application seems to be kind of heading in this direction, creating kind of a simpler interface to their product. That was part one. And part two, I actually use LinkPad as far as talking to these OData feeds, but I have some issues. So I guess I was looking for someone at this conference I could talk to as far as some of the things I was having issues, because in there I can quickly create the right query and filter out all those columns. So it's kind of a quick application.
Okay. Yeah. Let's follow up offline.
What about the web API piece? Are you guys? It seems like everyone else seems to be doing my overstepping my bounds as far as asking that question.
No, that's fine. So around like reporting improvements in general, yes, we understand this is a main pain point currently with Project Online. So as I mentioned, like we are still working really hard to improve performance and features in general in that space. This is something that's going to be an ongoing effort in the next few months, potentially even the next few years. But the good thing about Online is, as you can see, like we release improvements along the way. So hopefully you won't have to wait. No, you will not have to wait 3 years to get the next. Okay. Oh, that's an interesting point. Yes, we do. 7.
We also have a recording of a roadmap, I believe. We
had a session. Roadmap.office.com, I think. Or Office 365?
That's
Office
correct.
365.
Office 365, yeah.
I think so. No, I think it's Office.
It's just Office. Office.com/roadmap.
There you go. So this is the Office 365 roadmap. So you get all the different services in there, advertising there, what they're currently working on, what's rolling out, and what's already been launched. Yeah, I understand. Now you can filter by project, and you would see that we've advertised all the new APIs that I've just talked about, and we also are basically we've talked this week about the new resource engagement and resource capacity planning features that we're adding in 2016, the add-in right back to the client, email notifications as well that we're adding to the service. So yes, keep an eye on this roadmap page. Also, you can also check the other projects, Exchange, SharePoint, and others. This is where we communicate what's going to come down the line. Thank you.
So I have a question, but first on the SharePoint API document thing that was brought up earlier, the answer is yes, the API does support setting metadata on documents, even if it's from the taxonomy.
Okay. Good.
And then on the question is whether or not projects are or going to be entities in Office Graph relating to users.
Good question.
It's a very good question. Currently, we don't have any plans to.
We don't have any plans. I mean, in the past, the limitation we had with indexing project content is that accessing project content requires an extra license. And so we specifically prevent, back in the day, FAST and SharePoint search servers, et cetera, to index that content because we couldn't check if that person would have access to the data. There's also some compliance and privacy issues. You can set up some pretty complex rule in project to prevent access to specific projects that are critical, et cetera. So we don't want to advertently expose that information to people like in Delve or other locations.
It's just a suggestion or comments about the OData and the SSIS package. So OData, the output of OData is JSON, which is really not efficient. You know, if you look at JSON data, every row, the column header is repeated every row. And also, an integer or a number become a string is super large. So I think if you guys can do some compression on the server side and also the SSIS side, that will improve the performance a lot. You know, the payload will reduce a lot, I should say.
That's a good point.
And we're aware of the issue. So stay tuned. I would say stay tuned.
Yeah, because
we're very much aware of the issue and looking at.
Yeah, we do similar thing on our side to do this.
Thank you.
Hi, is there a way to make the project center web part to behave independently? So that way, if I want to make like a dashboard with a project center web app, I can put several of them, because if I put several of them and then I change them, then they'll have the same behavior. So there's no way I can independently put them in the same page.
Yeah, no, you're right. We cannot, because there's the ribbon is basically associated with the project center on that page. And so if you zoom in and zoom out, it's only going to affect the project center. There's no way to have different settings for different project centers.
Does this integrate with OneDrive and everything? I mean, I don't see a...
Yes. I mean...
you just didn't set it up.
If you have the project site creation turned on, if you go to a specific project and then go to its project site, then you're in SharePoint land.
Oh, right. But when I was back in project server land or project land, you don't see the link there. So where's, I guess, do you have OneDrive usually shows up as a link on here, or?
You can, in PWA, you can add the link back. We just hide the link to keep it, you know, a little cleaner.
And this is using Azure AD and everything, right? This is using the same directory?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
So you have your documents, notebook, the issues, risks, and deliverables, et cetera, all in there. I don't, on the client, yes, we can now set, on the server? I don't think so. Yeah, so the question was, can we customize the date range of the timeline on the server? The answer is currently no. We've added this capability to the client. Oh, the timescale. Oh, sorry. I thought about the timeline.
So the timeline will be supported for date range.
Okay.
Timescale, you can't choose like weeks or months granularity. You just get to zoom in, zoom out.
I see. Okay, so let me repeat that. So we can customize the timeline, but not the timescale.
Great. So
Good.
I think we're at time.
I think we're out of time.
I think the red
well,
light.
thank you.